This is my 1986 MR2 garage find, complete with the engine being already pulled. Looks like they rebuilt most of it, but there are a few missing parts that I'm trying to figure out and piece back together, including this crazy kid gaping hole through the front of the top of the timing cover. I don't know why they think that looks cool, but we're going to patch that up with a custom plate. Transmission, they did have the clutch plate and flywheel redone, pressure plate, new bearing. We'll put that in later. We're going to turbocharge this deal. One problem I did notice is I pulled off this exhaust manifold, and the exhaust manifold had a crack in it. So, crack can be seen right here. And so we're going to get a new manifold. It's only $200 through Toyota. All the aftermarket manifolds they have are for turbochargers. The problem we have with that is they all come straight down here and run into here and to where the air conditioning mount is. And so in Texas I would have to do without air conditioning and have to relocate my oil filter, which I don't really want to do. So instead I decided to I'll buy a new manifold, but you can't get a flange for it anywhere. So I decided to custom make my own flange, which I did off a piece of steel right here. That way I will make an adapter that goes to the turbocharger I'm going to put on it, and we'll make our own crossover exhaust pipe underneath to go with the new exhaust that was missing as well, and catalytic converter, which is under here. As part of this conversion to turbo, we need a little more space. We're also going to replace the engine ECU with a custom one that'll handle the other intake pressures and everything else. The battery we are relocating to the little rear trunk, so we have room for some of the other things we're going to do with the turbocharger. We cut a hole. I had some trim, so I nice and carefully wrapped it right around here so that we wouldn't get any of the components for the battery to be cut. And the battery end comes right through like that. We'll put the other one through, make a little bracket which we'll show later, and the battery will be conveniently moved to the very rear. And that will free up more room in the engine bay for other cool stuff. Little shot of the interior, which is really not too bad. You know, relatively good shape considering it's an 86, an original. Not bad, not bad. A few little things we got to do, but you know, it's not beat up, cracked, or torn up, or reeking of smoke. Okay, so here we are, battery relocation in the trunk. Got everything done. Put a special piece of trim that I get from aircraft around so it doesn't gouge in, or we can't get an arc from it, so it's nice and it's taken care of that way. And that part's done, and then we'll pull this bracket out later. Right now we're working on this this timing cover that we were talking about earlier, and what I'm going to do is I decided to cut the hole out, put a piece of polycarbonate Lexan in, acrylic, and I'm going to mount it. Then I'm going to put the plate right there, and it'll be clear and you can see right through it, which should be kind of a neat little thing. So I'll show that a little later. Okay, put it on with the acrylic. Gonna have to do another coat of resealant just to make sure it's a little cleaner. But that's the redesigned makeshift timing cover there, just because the other person had before me cut big holes in it, so I kind of made lemonade here. So we'll try to see if we can do a little bit better later. Been kind of busy. We painted the transmission red. and we put it onto the engine. And the turbocharger just showed up. So we're going to go over and get a good look at that. So what do we got?
Turbo engine part.
Turbocharger for the engine. Okay. You've got the exhaust flange in your hand. Going to try to make sure that it lines up right. Looks like we're good, doesn't it?
Yeah, I already checked it just a little bit.
Cool. We'll go and see if this is going to fit onto the engine, and then make our adaptations to get it all installed and fire the sucker up. What I'm trying to do is figure out how I'm going to adapt this to the MR2 engine. It's a little bit complicated because there's lots of things in the way, and I don't want to do it to where I have to remove the air conditioner or a lot of other things. So I've basically taken off all of the screws that go along the side of the outlet housing, disconnected the wastegate actuator. For now, I may have to totally redo how this fits together and try to make it work. But when you take this off, you can see the blower side of the turbo right here, and the inside. The inlet, of course, is here, and the compression side is right here. This is your boost section right here that you put your fitting on so you can determine how much boost you want. And of course, that's the wastegate controller right there, and we're going to do more with that later. Problem is the way they have this thing initially hooked up might not work correctly with how I have to hook it up to the engine because of the direction of the way the outlet is and the position of it. Because of that, I've taken it off and going to have to re-put it back on here, which is no big deal, but it bolts to these bolts, and the position it was in, I could tell clearly was not going to work because it was aiming the outlet right back against the side of the engine block. This is the oil outlet that goes to the oil pan, so that's the drain side. This is the oil inlet side on this side. So I was looking at options whether to mount this turbo underneath the exhaust with the exhaust coming down this way, or on top of the engine mount, which in some cases means that I have to flip the whole thing. And of course, you know, the compression side just came off because I was screwed down, but that would mean I would have to relocate this, which would mean I'd have to undo all of these screws and turn the whole body the other direction in order to get the turbocharger sitting on top, so that I could do a top mount on the engine right above the off to the side of the valve covers. So I'm going to go reevaluate this, and we'll catch up later. So the turbocharger with a custom-made stainless downpipe, which we're going to make a modification and adapt later. We had to turn the entire turbocharger boost outlet around so that it would point the right direction. That's this piece right here. It turns. Got to get me a new banjo fitting outlet for here. A little better picture of the downpipe I had custom made today with the V-band fitting. Turbocharger right here. This is an extra banjo fitting that actually goes to the engine return oil section. Just wanted to see if it would fit okay, so I'm going to have to find me an extra one of these with the barb and use that. The boost section, or the snail part, I actually had to unbolt all of these screws here, these bolts. That allows you to turn the entire piece. Anyway, I repositioned it to come out this direction because the way it was coming out over here, and that was the wrong direction. So you can change these things by undoing them. The pressure hose is not connected at the moment because we're going to run it through a manual boost controller. And we'll show that later. This is my powder coat oven. I decided to powder coat the exhaust manifold right in there. Looking pretty. Sandblasted it all off. We'll get that baby on and bolt it up and see if we can make it fit with the turbocharger later. Little Eastwood powder coat gun and powder coats right there. Everything you need in a home garage shop with a TIG and a MIG and stick welder. Can't forget the punching bag and the project car. So we'll see how we do. So we'll show this more as I hoist it up and actually lower it into the MR2 later. But for now, it's out of my box and get it out of the way. We'll start figuring out what's missing on the engine and get it all put on correctly. Cool. Well, here we are, custom turbocharging. Here's our turbocharger. And we had a custom designed stainless steel exhaust pipe, downpipe coming off of our groove flange. And here we have our manifold, and it has a special setup with 3 bolts. Has to be custom adapted. You just can't buy this flange anywhere. So we made a flange right here. It has the 3 holes going to the turbo flange. In the process, some of the bolts wouldn't come through. We had to grind off the side of them so that we could get them to fit in properly. There's another one with the ground off side right there. That way they would bolt on properly to the turbocharger. Still got to do a little touch-up work, clean up the holes a little bit. But hopefully we'll get this thing put in and dropped into the MR2 in the next day or two. We also picked us up some high-flow injectors. They are right there, nice, shiny, and pretty. They're going to go in our standard fuel rail here. There's been was originally totally covered in muck, so it's been cleaned up substantially. And we'll go through one at a time. Okay, here we are. We're earlier I was showing how I was redoing part of a bracket for the Spencer's here helping me.
Hey.
And what are we doing?
Well, as of right now, we just kind of widen. It's kind of hot still.
We've been working on this bracket right here. We had it custom done so we could match the original manifold up with the turbo flange, and so it's custom design. But a couple of openings weren't quite as round as we wanted, and a few things. So we've been working on it. It's a little bit hot. We're going to put it together and bolt that with the gaskets now to the original stock cast iron manifold. And then we're going to line up the turbo and see how it lines up so that we can determine how we're going to drop this in and route the exhaust and all of that. And the quacking you hear is our wacky neighbor that got a Duck Dynasty Duck Commander call, so more of that later. Right here is where the wideband O2 sensor is going to go. We ended up having to make a custom bracket for that, and that will be shown in a little bit.
This is the location where the air conditioning pump goes. This shows us trying to proportion the engine and get it into the very small opening into the engine compartment of the MR2. After finding out that it was a little bit tougher than expected, we had to pull off the exhaust manifold and the intake manifold to get it in, and then put them back on once it was in place. What a pain in the butt. The hooks you see on the ceiling are how we walked the engine across to get it lined up with the engine compartment. We lifted it straight up between the two garage doors with a come-along and some ratchet straps, and then slowly switched from one eyelet to the other on the ceiling until we got it positioned correctly. This is the redneck way of putting an engine into your MR2.
This is just a little video clip to show how fabrication works. What I have here is a piece of metal stock, and I have to make an adapter for a wideband O2 sensor. So I took the gasket that goes into the factory O2 sensor that goes into the MR2. It goes into the exhaust manifold, and it has to thread into here. So this plate, we've already ground a little bit of it out, starting to round it to get the template for this. We're going to plasma cut the rest, grind it off, and right here we're going to weld a 1-inch bung and complete the circle here so it fits correctly, and weld that bung in so that the wideband O2 sensor will fit properly, and we'll test it out with our turbocharger. And here's the MR2. We have the engine in it, which you can't see very well. Probably grab a light here. Hold on. Well, here it is. Brand new wideband O2 sensor from Innovate Motorsports. Cabling. Gauge. Different face bezels for different colors. Computer cable hookup. And the O2 sensor. And the bung. With software. Pretty cool. We'll have to figure this out, hook it up, and see how she goes. Here we go, back to fabricating this flange that goes to this wideband O2 sensor. I plasma cut out the edge here, and you can see it's still kind of rough. And I'm starting to grind it down to match the template lines of the gasket. Bung in our special fabricated adapter goes on the factory exhaust manifold for the MR2. And it's welded on, so we're going to go install this little bugger. And it's already calibrated, so we're going to go through a couple other little software things and see what we end up with. This is the tuning kit. Soldering iron workbench. We have to solder these pieces in by hand. It is a do-it-yourself plug-and-play by AutoTune. And we have some of our components in the bag, and we're going to be working on some of these connectors right now that are going to go in these ports. Hopefully this will take care of the high idle problem, and allow us to tune the fuel injection and other things. But here I am. almost finished with the tuning kit for the MR2. Lots of soldering connections. On the back side, you can see the jumpers. One of them isn't quite connected yet, but give you a little bit of an idea of what's involved. This is mounted to a couple of brackets, and there's a lot of components underneath inside that you don't see because it covers it up. So next step is to double check connections, hook it up to the computer, and see if there's anything that needs to be corrected. And then we can hook up to the car and see if we can tune this baby in. So here we go, all put together. We got to tune it up, double check it, see if this baby works.
It turns out after we did all this work and had the engine installed, we started it up and heard a little bit of noise, took it out on the road and blew the head. Come to find out, the guy did not put it together correctly, and on part 2 you'll see what we did to rebuild it and to get it run smoothly and the full tuning process. Thanks, and join us for part 2.